Welcome. We thought we'd have a bit of a panel discussion about the future of media from different perspectives, from staff from our department here, Media, Music, Communication and Cultural Studies. My name's Mark Evans, the head of the department. Let me just introduce the panel quickly. I'm going to start with Catherine Lumby in the middle here, hiding in the middle. Professor Catherine Lumby has joined us this year, which we're very thrilled about. One of Australia's leading minds, well, let's say Australia's leading mind on all things media. So wonderful to have her here. Lauren Gorfinkel has also joined us this year. You'll see a bit of a theme. And an expert in Chinese media. Guy Morrow on the end here, an expert in management for the arts and particularly for music industries. Iqbal Barkat also joined us this year. An expert in screen production and particularly in community video, and is doing a range of exciting things. And Phyllis Sakanovsky on the end, who is running lots of our industry-related programs in what we call PACE units and internships, and so she's got some perspectives on that to bring to us. But I'll start with Catherine in the middle. It's obviously a great moment of disruption with what's happening in the industry, what's happening to the media sphere. Why would anyone study journalism? Isn't journalism dead? And why would you study media now?
That's a great question, Mark. I mean, I think if you look, for those of you who look at what's happening in newspapers, Fairfax and the Murdoch press, look at what's happening with free-to-air television. It reminds me of one of those disaster movies where the mother's standing in the kitchen and she sees a crack in the lino, and the next day LA's sliding into the sea. It's like that. I mean, it's happened. The business models have unravelled rapidly. Now, there are many reasons I chose to come to Macquarie, partly because it's a really exciting department, but one of the really attractive things about moving from UNSW to Macquarie for me was the facilities that we have in this building. They are, I have set up the media and journalism degree at University of Sydney, was there for 8 years, went to New South Wales University to set up a research centre. I've taught at UTS many years ago. I'm familiar with the facilities in the Sydney Basin, and Macquarie University media facilities, and across all the subjects that are taught here in this department are the best in Australia. And that's because this building used to house the Australian Film, Television and Radio School, and the facilities are extraordinary. And one of the things that attracted me to coming here was that we've got facilities that means we can teach journalism, media and communication in a forward-looking way. Because to go back to your question, Mark, the reality is that no, the cadetships that used to be there in the traditional print media, in television and radio and so forth, are shrinking. There's no question about that. Traditional media industries are under pressure. However, what we do know is that a whole array of new business models are opening up, and that a whole lot of media practice and journalistic practice has moved into online and social media. And so one of the things I'm excited about is this new Future Journalism program. It's a master's level program that's been set up to start next year, that will take advantage of these facilities, and that is very much focused on giving graduates the skills they need to work in the media and as journalists in forward-looking ways. Both, and of course our undergraduate degree takes advantage of those facilities as well. And I'll personally be teaching a unit on social media and a unit on social media law and ethics. And I'm excited because those subjects just aren't being taught at any other university in Sydney.
Thanks, Matt. Lauren, I'll ask you, you work a lot in the international media sphere, particularly in China. What do you think's happening? How's the future of media internationally?
Oh, well, I think it's a really exciting arena to be looking at now as well. Also because, as Kath was saying, there's this massive revolution in the types of technological changes that are happening. So if I can ask you, how many of you watch TV programs from other countries? Which countries? America, what else? Any other countries besides America? Japan, yeah. What else? China? You're watching Chinese television from here? Yeah, and you're watching via the internet or satellite television? So we've got all these technologies now that we can actually harness, and we see in a globalised era that you don't have to be in China now to watch Chinese television. You could be here, you could be anywhere around the world. And so in international communication, that's some of the things that we're looking at, some of those flows of media across the world, flowing with people who are migrating to other countries, but even people who haven't come from those countries who are interested in Japanese television or Chinese television. And I've got a friend of mine who's obsessed with that Chinese dating show, If You Are the One. Any of you seen that one? Yeah. So these flows are really fascinating, and they give you insights into different countries, different perspectives, different interconnections between people around the world these days. And international communication, it's not about, the international is not just out there, it's here as well, as you can see. So many of you are accessing, for example, television shows or internet sites from all around the world and communicating with people from all around the world, exchanging ideas, and through international communication, these subjects, we can get a nuanced insight into the different societies and cultures, both around the world and within Australia as well.
Great, thank you. Iqbal, I'm curious, how are we going to tell stories in the future?
Yeah, in fact, I think it's, thanks for that question, Mark. Because when we think about the future of the media, most people are telling us that the future is actually beyond the screen, right? To wearable technologies, to the Internet of Things, etc. But I think that is focusing too much on a particular medium, on a particular technology. If we look beyond technology, for example, we can see a whole different scenario happening, because we still need some kind of screen, multiples of screens to tell stories with. And I think that's where the future is. So, you know, when cinema was born, the day it was born, people said cinema is dead, right? On the day it was born. How many of you have seen that great film by Martin Scorsese called Hugo? Hugo, anyone? Okay, great. Quite a few of you here. Fantastic. You remember the film is about this great early pioneering filmmaker called George Méliès, right? And he wanted to buy a camera. He was a magician. He saw the possibilities in the film camera. He wanted to buy one. So he approached the inventors, the Lumiere brothers, and they say, forget about it, because this technology has no future, right? So that was when cinema was born. So we know that the death of cinema has been pronounced again and again, and it sort of never ever happened, right? So as one of my favorite filmmakers said, cinema is dead, long live cinema, right? Because we'll continue to watch one kind of screen or another, and the screen is a fantastic way to tell stories. But I think that there are a few things with the cinema model itself that in a way should die and will die. Like the Hollywood tentpole model, where you have one successful production that basically supports 30 kind of failed productions. I think that kind of model basically is on the way out, because there's only one other industry that operates on that model. Can anyone tell me what that industry is? There's film industry, and there's one other industry that has this tentpole kind of mentality, where you have many, many failures and you have one gargantuan success.
The game industry?
It's the mining industry, right? Yeah, you sink about 3,000 holes in the ground before one hole is successful, and each hole costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to sink. So we know that industry is not very sustainable for the future. But I don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. There's something quite wonderful about Hollywood as well, right? It has taught us a language which we call in our circles the modernist vernacular. This language is we are still speaking this language. We may not know the rules of this language, but we are speaking it, right? I'll give you a great example. Very early in the 20th century, a great Hollywood director called D.W. Griffith invented a rule of filmmaking called cross-cutting, right? So for example, think about it. You're filming a scenario. You have a house on fire, and then you have a fire engine trying to get to this house, but halfway through getting to this house, they actually, they have an engine failure, right? So in order to build up tension, what you would do, you show the house on fire, then you show the fire engine on the road, then you show the house on fire again, and then basically you show the fire engine breaking down in the middle of the road, right? That is called cross-cutting. And that technique we still use today. It was invented over 100 years ago. So we are not going to throw out the baby with the bathwater. Certain models will have to go. Like the model, for example, where in a film production you need 300 people or 400 people or thousands of people in order to do a production. What we do here in Macquarie, and I've been doing it in my practice, is to encourage a kind of independent, mobile, collaborative practice We want to be filmmaking polymaths, right? Whereby we learn how to direct, how to write, how to record with the camera, how to record sound, how to edit. So we want to do all these things and become mobile. And I personally believe, like Mark mentioned, the kind of work that I'm interested in is in community film production. Why is that? Because we need organizations like Macquarie University, the governments, NGOs, all kinds of organizations need to tell their stories in order to stay relevant in this world today. And that's where we come in as experts, right? Because we can help these organizations tell their stories. So many of my students, my ex-students now, are working for people like Amnesty, for organizations like Amnesty. So I think it's a very successful model for the future.
Great, thanks Iqbal. Guy, a change of tack, the business of media in the future, what's the business look like?
Yeah, so I guess as someone who researches and works in the music business, the music industry was the canary in the internet coal mine, and a lot of the effects that have been discussed on the panel so far were experienced quite early on in terms of the recording income stream. But the future of the media business and the music business specifically will involve the empowerment of the artists themselves. So I don't believe in that myth that you can cut out the intermediaries, but the relationship to the intermediaries has changed. So if you think about the old model where you'd have the artist and then they'd need to get to an intermediary like a record label or a booking agent, and then if they were accepted, they were then on a short list from which consumers could choose their works from. So what's happened now is that the artist does go directly to the consumer, and then but to grow it further into a sustainable career, sustainable business, you've got the intermediary forms the top of the triangle, and you've got this different model happening. And I think that if the music industry is the canary in the coal mine, perhaps that's a model for other sectors of the industry. But what it means in terms of careers, if you look at some of the really successful artists in the world at the moment, say Gautier is an Australian artist, or Macquarie and Ryan Lewis, or Mumford & Sons, they all own their own masters, i.e. they all own their own copyrights. Or a band that came out of Macquarie University, Boy and Bear, they have done license deals. They own their own copyright. They own their own company and then license it to the intermediaries. Or Jonty, who's an artist who's come out of Macquarie's very groundbreaking musician. He's in Gautier's touring band. And these artists, because they own their own record companies and own their own copyrights, when they do go to number one on the Billboard charts, it's dramatically different, the remuneration you get. And you're saying, well, is it still a star system where you throw, 1 out of 10 is the Gautier who does go to number one on the Billboard charts? But I think, I don't know, I think it still is a star system, but it's also broader than it used to be, in the sense that you can actually get on and, in the past you'd have the people who were, struggling, and then you have the Gautiers of the world. And now there's a middle ground, which didn't exist before. And that's really exciting for people who can now be empowered to create amazing art. So, yeah.
Thank you. And just finally, Phyllis, you do a lot of work with our industry partners. What are they saying they want to see from future media graduates?
Good question. I'll just set the background to that. One of the most fantastic things about Macquarie, I think, is the emphasis on participation and community engagement. Macquarie has a focus and a department called Participation and Community Engagement. And in the next few years, the aim is that every student who graduates from Macquarie will have done at least one semester working in their field, in the community, out there in an organisation not based in the university. And I think that's fantastic, and it's very high, a high priority for the university. It's when you graduate from Macquarie, there are what's called graduate capabilities, and those are the outcomes that every student has to attain when they finish studying here. and two of them, I'll read them, relate to the broader world out there, which it's valuing social inclusion and educating students to become engaged and ethical and local and global citizens. And Macquarie is one of the pioneering universities in embedding this in the curriculum. And I'm in the fortunate position of convening two of the engagement subjects. Guy has another one, which is arts management, and there's another one coming up, which is in international communication. And every semester, there's a media internship subject, and around 60 students every semester will go out, find their own placement in an organization, work there for 100 hours, and then and they find that it's the way that they can practice the stuff that they've been learning. So we've got students in PR consultancies, in music, film, industry bodies, government bodies, a few working in NGOs, not enough as far as I'm concerned. I'm trying to develop that. But they go out there, and I did a survey on the students that did the subject last semester, and I found that 72% of those who responded got permanent work in that organisation where they'd interned. So, which is fantastic. So that means that they went there as students with the skills that they'd learnt at university in production subjects and in theory, and they sat down there and worked in these organisations and were so highly regarded that their internships either turned into part-time paid work, full-time work, or the internship was extended. So what people are looking for, I think, is enthusiasm, the willingness to give it a go, to take what you know, the skills that you know in film making, broadcast, public relations, and get out there and learn what the businesses have to offer, the writing skills that they've learn how to work in teams, do the coffee rounds, photocopying, but the willingness to get in there and show that they've got the competence. And I think that is what they're looking for, is energy and enthusiasm and the commitment to what they've learned to doing that in the workplace.
Okay, great. Thank you. So the future of media is obviously industry relevant. We're talking about new ways of delivering stories, cutting through the noise. There's a lot of noise. You've got to be able to get your story out there and get it heard. It's obviously international, and there's obviously new business models operating as well. Catherine, how important is critical thinking in the future of media?
Well, I mean, it's completely central, Mark. I think one of the when you look at whatever area of media practice or any of the industries we've been discussing, when you look at how you cut through the noise, because there's no question there's more and more content being produced, and a lot of it, of course, is being produced by amateurs. I mean, how many people here are on Twitter? Right. So, I mean, increasingly people are going to Twitter to get their news information. I mean, because Twitter's leapt ahead of journalism often. So with the election, I was just on Twitter all the time. If there was a story breaking, you'd hear it on Twitter well before you'd hear it often on the ABC 24 or something. And so one of the things is there's a lot of content produced by amateurs. So what will distinguish a really successful entrepreneurial professional in this new age? And one of the answers to that is it is the ability to think critically. It's research skills, it's good communication skills. Obviously, production skills are important, but it doesn't matter how polished your production is if you don't have something useful to say and you haven't thought through how to communicate your message succinctly in an entertaining manner. You haven't thought about, or you don't have the skills to think critically, to put a new twist on a topic that's of public interest. And you don't know how to research something to ensure that your sources are accurate. And so I think that, right through, one of the things that's very much focused on in the degrees here are a kind of portfolio of skills that include thinking critically, researching accurately and in depth, communicating engagingly as well as clearly, of course. And they're a kind of portfolio of skills that really underpin any kind of media practice.
Great, thank you. We've got a few minutes. I might open it up to the floor. I've got a question up the back.
How do you know that the Twitter's critical?
Well, you don't, and that's a really interesting question. In fact, I just wrote a book chapter about this. Twitter, okay, the analogy I would use is if, say, a big news story breaks, it's like a big downpour. Twitter's like a storm drain. So all this water pours down into the storm drain. There's a whole lot of rubbish that gets swept along. But if you sort of strip out the rubbish, there's something that's worth distilling in the storm drain. And so what you find is, for instance, with the Boston Marathon bombings, I was watching the Twitter feed the whole time. Now, people started saying inaccurate things on that Twitter feed. But what the Twitter community does, and it is a community, is call out inaccuracy. So someone says something inaccurate, 5 other people will jump in immediately and say, that's not the case. I'm actually sitting here, I can see the police in my backyard now. So that's the interesting thing, I think, about media content now doesn't just move vertically. You know, it used to be sort of a one-to-many model. So you had professionals producing content that just went down and flowed out like that. Today, content moves horizontally. So a piece of content might be produced by an amateur. It might then get sampled. Say if it's a piece of music, gets sampled, put on SoundCloud. You know, that gets distributed through Facebook, and then potentially it ends up on the radio if it's good enough. So you have a completely different approach to producing content. Yes. Yep.
That may, there could be an opportunity for an accreditation company in between while Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
The guy on the right here, when you form a company to actually do the artist to the media, outside media, how are they going to keep control of that picture or that sound so that someone doesn't send it somewhere else to plot it or, destroy the commercial income side of it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, one thing that fascinates me is the liveness in music. So if you, in the past, I guess you could control the development of the imagery. You could make a music video, and if someone used it in a way that you didn't like, you could claim moral rights in it and say, well, you know. But now with any gig can be filmed by an amateur and put up, and that is actually sometimes breaching the artist's moral rights in terms of what they want to have done with that. But I think as far as setting up companies and what my philosophy on that is that we try and get the artists to retain ownership of their copyright as representatives of artists. The larger media entities usually want an assignment of copyright to them, which was the norm in the past. So I think in the past, if you assigned copyright to, say, a record label, they could commercialise it in any number of ways, and they would disregard the artist's moral rights. Whereas now, because you're more likely to be able to procure a license agreement, and the artist company retains ownership of the copyright, licenses it to the major label, they're in a better position. And eventually those rights will revert back to the artist's own company. And then they are in more control of what happens with those copyrights. But that won't stop amateurs and bloggers filming the wicked facials that the guitarist has whilst performing or something. Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think it's also, just if I can add, we've moved away from a command and control era where you had a handful of professionals holding on to ownership of content. And actually, I think the smart artists, media practitioners and so on are realising that actually you don't come down like a hammer on amateurs who might be distributing your content, because what they're really doing is promoting it. And there's a lot of research that suggests that people who download things from the internet, if they like it, they sample it and then they actually go and buy it.